A blinding flash of lightning tore across the night sky, illuminating Sophia Winters' terrified face for a split second before darkness swallowed the world again. Her horse, a chestnut mare named Penny, reared in panic, eyes rolling white with fear as thunder crashed overhead. Before Sophia could tighten her grip on the reins, Penny bolted, throwing her backward into the mud. The last thing she saw was her beloved horse disappearing into the stormy darkness, carrying with her everything Sophia owned in the world: Penny. Sophia screamed, her voice drowned by the howling wind. "Come back!" But her cries were futile. By the time she struggled to her feet, soaked to the bone and shivering, her horse was long gone. Rain pelted mercilessly against her face as she stood alone on the deserted trail just outside Independence, Missouri. In the spring of 1873, Sophia had been traveling west from St. Louis, hoping to claim the small parcel of land her late father had purchased years ago. At 24, with both parents now gone and nowhere else to call home, that deed represented her only chance at a future. Now it was vanishing into the storm-drenched night, tucked securely in her saddlebags along with every cent she possessed. Miles away, Finnegan Hayes sat on the porch of his small ranch house, watching the storm roll across the plains. Lightning fractured the sky in jagged patterns, and he pulled his jacket tighter around his broad shoulders. At 30 years old, Finn had seen his share of violent prairie storms, but this one had a particular fury to it that made him uneasy. His ranch hand, old Tom Wilkins, stepped out onto the porch, a mug of coffee in his weathered hands. "Nasty night," Tom remarked, his voice nearly lost in a thunderclap. Finn nodded. "Something about this one doesn't sit right." As if in answer, the sound of hoofbeats approached from the east. Finn stood, peering through the curtain of rain. A horse emerged from the darkness, riderless and wild-eyed, its saddle soaked and saddlebags flapping against its heaving flanks. "Whoa there!" Finn called, descending the steps carefully. The mare slowed, exhausted and frightened. As he approached with measured steps and soothing words, the animal finally stopped, trembling violently. "Easy now," Finn murmured, taking hold of the dangling reins. "Where's your rider, girl?" Tom joined him, holding a lantern high. "Looks like someone's in a heap of trouble." No rider would part with their mount willingly, especially on a night like this. Finn ran his hand down the horse's neck. "She's a fine mare, well-bred." His fingers found the embroidery on the saddle, PW, and well-loved. He led the horse to the stable, where he and Tom removed her tack and rubbed her down. As they worked, Finn noticed the saddlebags were unusually heavy. "We should check what's inside," Tom suggested. "Might tell us who she belongs to." Finn hesitated. "Feels like prying, but you're right." Inside the larger bag, they found women's clothing, a few personal items, and a small leather pouch containing a modest sum of money. In the smaller bag was a deed to a plot of land not far from Finn's own ranch, made out to Harold Winters, along with a worn letter addressed to Sophia Winters. "Sophia," Finn said softly, testing the name. "She must have been caught in the storm." Tom looked at him knowingly. "You're thinking of going out there?" "First light," Finn confirmed. "No sense getting lost in this downpour. But come morning, I'm tracking this mare's path back to wherever she left her rider." Tom shook his head. "You and your rescues, Finn. One of these days it'll be the death of you." Finn merely smiled and continued brushing the mare's coat. "What do you say, girl? Ready to help me find your Sophia come morning?" The horse nickered softly, as if in agreement. Dawn broke with grudging reluctance, the sun struggling to pierce through lingering storm clouds. Sophia had spent the night huddled beneath the meager shelter of a lightning-struck oak, too exhausted and defeated to walk any further in the darkness. Her dress clung to her like a second skin, still damp despite the hours that had passed since the rain stopped. She stood on shaky legs, surveying the muddy trail ahead. Without Penny, Independence was at least a day's walk, and her father's land even farther. Worse, without the deed, she had no proof the land was hers to claim. One step at a time, she murmured to herself, a habit formed during the long months of nursing her father through his final illness. Just keep moving forward. With no other choice, she began walking west, following the hoof prints Penny had left in the soft earth. They would soon disappear, she knew, washed away by the storm or obscured by other travelers, but for now they provided a tenuous connection to her lost companion. As the morning wore on, hunger gnawed at her stomach. She'd had nothing to eat since a small meal the previous afternoon. The sparse vegetation offered little in the way of sustenance, though she did manage to find a few wild berries that took the edge off her hunger. By midday, the sun had finally emerged, baking the damp earth and filling the air with humid heat. Sophia's clothes had dried but were stiff with mud. Her boots rubbed painfully against her heels, and she was forced to stop frequently to rest. During one such rest, seated on a fallen log, she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats. Hope surged through her veins. Could it be Penny, somehow finding her way back? But it was quickly tempered by caution. Lone women on deserted trails were vulnerable, as her father had repeatedly warned her. Sophia moved off the trail, concealing herself behind a thicket of brush. Through the leaves, she watched as a rider approached a man on a sturdy buckskin, leading a second horse that made her heart leap. "Penny," she gasped, emerging from her hiding place without thinking. The rider pulled up short, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun at his hip before relaxing. "Miss Winters," he called. Sophia froze. How did this stranger know her name? She studied him warily, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. Handsome, certainly, but that meant little when it came to a man's character. "Who's asking?" she replied, keeping her distance. He dismounted in one fluid motion. "Finnegan Hayes, madam." "I found your horse last night during the storm. She wandered onto my property about 10 miles east of here." Relief flooded through Sophia, nearly buckling her knees. "Oh, thank God. Penny is all I have in the world." Finn nodded, keeping his distance, seeming to understand her wariness. "I followed her trail back. Wasn't easy after the rain, but I've done my share of tracking." He paused, his expression softening. "You must have had a rough night. Are you hurt?" "Just tired and hungry," Sophia admitted. "And grateful, Mr. Hayes, truly grateful." Finn reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Got some cornbread and jerky here. Not much, but it'll keep your strength up." He handed it to her, careful not to crowd her space, and Sophia accepted it gratefully. As she ate, she glanced repeatedly at Penny, who seemed calm and well cared for. "Did you look in my saddlebags?" she asked between bites, suddenly remembering the deed and her money. "Only to find out who you were," Finn admitted. "Everything's still there, including your deed and money. I'd have been out searching sooner, but tracking's near impossible in a downpour." Sophia studied him, trying to gauge his character. Men who returned lost horses and didn't steal valuable papers were rare enough. Those who then tracked through miles of mud to return them to their rightful owners were rarer still. "Thank you," she said simply. Finn nodded. "Where were you headed before the storm hit?" "My father's land." "Well, my land now." She finished the last of the cornbread. "He bought it years ago but never had the chance to see it. He died this winter." "I'm sorry for your loss," Finn said, and the sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "That parcel off Sullivan Creek, about 30 acres with a small cabin." Sophia blinked in surprise. "Yes, how did you know?" "I'm your neighbor, more or less. My ranch borders that property to the north. He smiled slightly. Old man Jenkins built that cabin 20 years ago, been empty for nearly a decade now. What kind of condition is it in? Sophia asked anxiously. She'd been picturing something habitable if modest. Finn's hesitation told her everything. Roof's still mostly there, he offered, but it'll need work before winter, a lot of work. Sophia's heart sank, but she lifted her chin. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Hayes. Never thought you were, Miss Winters, he gestured to Penny. Your mare's rested. If you'd allow me, I'd be happy to escort you the rest of the way. Sophia wavered. Accepting more help from this stranger seemed dangerous, yet the prospect of navigating unfamiliar territory alone was equally daunting. Finally, practicality won out. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. Finn helped her mount Penny, his hands strong but respectful as he steadied her foot in the stirrup. As they rode side by side, Sophia found herself studying his profile, the straight nose, firm jaw covered in a day's stubble, and the way his hat shadowed his eyes. There was something solid about him, dependable in a way she hadn't encountered often. They rode mostly in silence, with Finn occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing brief stories about the area. By late afternoon, they crested a small rise, and he reined his horse to a stop. There it is, he said, pointing to a clearing where a small cabin stood, looking forlorn and abandoned. Sullivan Creek runs just beyond those trees. Good water, never runs dry even in summer. Sophia's heart sank further as she took in the dilapidated structure. One window was completely missing, the door hung crookedly on a single hinge, and part of the roof had indeed collapsed inward. She began, unable to find a positive word. A mess, Finn finished honestly. But the bones are good. Solid foundation, strong timber frame. Jenkins knew what he was doing, even if time hasn't been kind to his handiwork. They rode closer and dismounted in what must have once been a yard. Sophia approached the cabin with trepidation, Finn following a respectful distance behind. The interior was no better than the exterior, dusty, with animal droppings scattered across the floor and cobwebs hanging from every corner. A rustic table lay on its side, one leg broken, and a crude bed frame occupied one corner, its mattress long since carried off by creatures or the elements. Well, Sophia said, forcing brightness into her voice, it has potential. Finn looked at her with newfound respect. That it does, Miss Winters, that it does. He glanced at the fading light outside. It'll be dark soon. This is no place for you to spend the night, not yet. I don't have much choice, Sophia replied, though the thought of sleeping in the cabin in its current state made her skin crawl. Finn removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. I have a proposition if you'll hear it. My ranch is about 3 miles north. I have a small guest room. My sister stays there when she visits from Kansas City. You'd be welcome to it until we can make this place more habitable. Sophia tensed. Mr. Hayes, while I appreciate your help today, I hardly know you. Fair enough, he acknowledged. My housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, lives in the main house as well. She's a proper widow of 65 with a tongue sharp enough to keep any man in line. You'd be under her protection as much as my roof. Sophia hesitated, weighing her limited options. Sleep in a crumbling cabin potentially shared with wildlife, or accept the hospitality of a man who had already proven himself honorable by returning her horse and possessions. Just until I can repair the basic necessities here, she clarified. A few days at most. Finn nodded. Of course. And I'd be happy to help with those repairs if you'll allow it. Neighborly duty and all. As they rode toward Finn's ranch, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Despite her exhaustion, Sophia couldn't help but admire the vastness of the landscape, rolling hills dotted with oak and cottonwood trees, the distant silhouette of mountains to the west, and endless sky above. "It's beautiful country," she said softly. "That it is," Finn agreed. "Gets in your blood after a while. I came out here from Pennsylvania 12 years ago, thought I'd make my fortune and head back east. Never could bring myself to leave. My father was the same. He visited once, just long enough to buy the land, and talked about it ever after. Said the sky was bigger here." She smiled at the memory. "I thought he was exaggerating." "Some things can't be exaggerated," Finn replied, glancing her way. As twilight deepened, the lights of Finn's ranch house came into view, a substantial 2-story structure with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and a large barn stood a short distance away. It was far more impressive than Sophia had expected. "You've done well for yourself," she observed. Finn shrugged modestly. "Been lucky with good cattle and better weather than most. Started with just 50 acres and 10 head of cattle. Bit by bit, it grew." They rode into the yard, where an older man emerged from the barn to greet them. "Found her then," he called, looking pleased. "Tom, this is Miss Sophia Winters," Finn introduced. "Miss Winters, my foreman, Tom Wilkins." "Pleasure to meet you, madam," Tom said, tipping his hat. "Glad to see you safe. Your mare gave us quite a start last night." Before Sophia could respond, the front door of the house opened, revealing a stout woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a pristine apron over her dark dress and had her hands planted firmly on her hips. "Finnegan Hayes, what time do you call this?" she demanded. "Supper's been ready this past hour." "Sorry, Mrs. Abernathy," Finn called back, unfazed by her scolding. "We had a longer ride than expected." The woman's expression softened as she noticed Sophia. "And who might this be?" Finn helped Sophia dismount, then led her toward the porch. "Mrs. Abernathy, this is Miss Sophia Winters. She's inherited the old Jenkins place, but it needs significant work before it's habitable. I've offered our guest room for a few days." Mrs. Abernathy's shrewd eyes assessed Sophia from head to toe, taking in her bedraggled appearance and mud-stained dress. Then, to Sophia's surprise, she smiled warmly. "About time we had another woman around here. Come in, dear. You look dead on your feet, and I've got stew that'll put the roses back in your cheeks." The interior of the house was as impressive as its exterior clean, well furnished, with polished wooden floors and a spacious layout. The central room served as both dining and sitting area, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. A staircase led to the upper floor, and several doors opened off the main room. Mrs. Abernathy ushered Sophia upstairs to a comfortable bedroom with a real feather bed and lace curtains. To her delight, the room adjoined a small washroom with an actual copper tub. "I'll have hot water sent up," the housekeeper promised. "And I'll find you something clean to wear. You're a slight thing, but I can take in one of my niece's dresses for tonight. Tomorrow we can see about washing your things." Overwhelmed by the unexpected luxury and kindness, Sophia felt tears threatening. "Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy. This is more than I expected." The older woman patted her hand. "Mr. Hayes has a good heart, even if he doesn't show it to just anyone. Now, you get yourself cleaned up, and I'll have food waiting when you're done." Later, dressed in a borrowed nightgown and wrapper, her hair clean and damp around her shoulders, Sophia descended to find Finn alone at the dining table, a book open beside his plate. He stood when she entered, looking momentarily startled by her transformation. "Mrs. Abernathy saved you a plate," he said, recovering quickly. "She's retired for the night but made me promise you'd eat something before sleep." "She's very kind," Sophia said, sitting across from him. The stew was still warm, rich with beef and vegetables, accompanied by fresh bread that melted in her mouth. "This is delicious. Best cook in 3 counties," Finn agreed. "Been with me since I built this place." She was widowed young and never remarried, said one husband was trial enough for any woman. Sophia smiled. "She reminds me of my mother's sister, same no-nonsense manner." They fell into easy conversation as she ate. Finn told her more about the area where to find the best supplies in Independence, which neighbors were trustworthy, which creek had the sweetest water. "The land around your cabin is good soil," he said. "Could support a decent garden with some work." Previous owner kept chickens, 2 coops fallen down now, but the foundation's still there. "You seem to know a lot about my property, Mr. Hayes." Finn looked slightly embarrassed. "I've kept an eye on it over the years. Jenkins was a good neighbor." After he passed, his children tried selling it, but nobody wanted such a small parcel until your father came along. I offered to buy it myself once, but they wanted more than I could pay at the time. Sophia considered this. "Were you disappointed when my father purchased it instead?" "At first," Finn admitted. "But he wrote me a letter afterward, said he planned to retire there someday, seemed like a decent man. I figured he'd be a good neighbor too." "He was the best of men," Sophia said softly. "Just unlucky in his timing. He worked so hard to save for this place, then fell ill before he could ever see it." They lapsed into comfortable silence as Sophia finished her meal. The day's events were catching up with her, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. "You're ready to collapse," Finn observed. "We can talk more tomorrow about what your cabin needs most urgently." Sophia nodded gratefully. "Thank you again, Mr. Hayes, for everything." "Finn," he corrected gently. "If we're to be neighbors, might as well use my given name." "Then you must call me Sophia," she replied, rising from the table. "Good night, Sophia," he said, his voice warming around her name. "Sleep well." In the guest room, Sophia sank into the feather bed with a sigh of pure bliss. Despite the strange surroundings, sleep claimed her almost instantly, deep and dreamless for the first time in months. Morning arrived with the crowing of roosters and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from below. Sophia dressed in her own clothes, now cleaned and pressed courtesy of Mrs. Abernathy, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was a hive of activity. Mrs. Abernathy stood at the stove, turning bacon with practiced efficiency while simultaneously kneading dough for what looked to be biscuits. Tom sat at the table nursing a coffee, and Finn was nowhere to be seen. "There she is," Mrs. Abernathy greeted cheerfully. "Sit down, child. You need a proper breakfast if you're to face that cabin today." Sophia obeyed, accepting a cup of strong coffee with gratitude. "Is Mr. Hayes already out working?" "Left at dawn," Tom replied. "Had to check the north pasture fence. Storm knocked down some posts." He glanced out the window. "Should be back soon, though." As if summoned by his words, the sound of hoofbeats approached. Moments later, Finn entered, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. His eyes found Sophia immediately, and a smile warmed his features. "Morning," he said. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "Your guest room is more comfortable than anything I've known since leaving my father's house." Finn joined them at the table, accepting a heaping plate from Mrs. Abernathy with a nod of thanks. "I rode by your cabin on my way back," he told Sophia. "Took a closer look at what needs doing most urgently." "And?" Sophia asked, trying not to sound too anxious. "Roof first," he said decisively. "No point fixing anything else if rain can still get in, then the window and door for security. After that, we can see to the inside." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Hayes, Finn, I appreciate your offer of help, but I can't impose further. You've already done more than enough." Mrs. Abernathy made a disapproving noise as she placed a plate of eggs and bacon before Sophia. Nonsense, child. No one can fix a roof alone, let alone a slip of a girl like yourself. Besides, it's the neighborly thing to do. Mrs. Abernathy's right, Tom added, and it's not just Finn. I've got some experience with carpentry and the other hands will pitch in too. We help our neighbors out here. You'd do the same if positions were reversed. Sophia looked from one face to another, touched by their matter-of-fact generosity. In St. Louis, neighbors might nod in passing but rarely offered substantive help without expectation of return. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll accept, Finn suggested, and that you'll be patient. We've got the spring roundup starting next week, so we'll have to work on your place in between other duties. Of course, Sophia agreed quickly. I wouldn't want to interfere with your livelihood. Good, Finn nodded. I've already sent one of the hands to town for lumber. Thought we might get started on the roof this afternoon, if that suits you. After breakfast, Sophia insisted on helping Mrs. Abernathy with the dishes while the men went about their morning chores. The housekeeper's initial protests gave way to appreciation when she saw that Sophia was both willing and competent. You've kept house before, Mrs. Abernathy observed. Since my mother died 6 years ago, Sophia confirmed. It was just my father and me until this winter. Mrs. Abernathy nodded sympathetically. And no brothers or sisters to share the burden, an older brother, Franklin, but he went west during the gold rush in '65. We haven't heard from him in years. Sophia's voice grew quiet. Father always believed he'd turn up someday. Men and their dreams of gold, Mrs. Abernathy sighed. Seen too many chase that rainbow, so it's just you now, just me, Sophia confirmed. The older woman studied her thoughtfully. You're taking on quite a challenge with that cabin, you know. Life out here isn't easy for anyone, let alone a woman alone. I'm aware, Sophia said, chin lifting slightly. But I'd rather face those challenges than return to St. Louis. There's nothing for me there but sewing piecework for pennies or marrying someone I don't love out of desperation. Mrs. Abernathy smiled approvingly. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. Reminds me of myself at your age. She handed Sophia the last plate to dry. Just remember, accepting help isn't the same as admitting defeat. Even the strongest among us need a hand sometimes. By early afternoon, Finn had organized an impressive work party at Sophia's cabin. Besides Tom and 2 other ranch hands, he'd somehow convinced the blacksmith from a nearby farm to join them. The men worked with efficient coordination, dismantling the damaged portions of the roof, while Sophia and Mrs. Abernathy cleared debris from inside. The floor's in decent shape once you get past the dirt, Mrs. Abernathy noted. Good oak planks, just needs a thorough scrubbing. And the walls are solid, Sophia agreed, running her hand over the rough-hewn logs. No rot that I can find. Midway through the afternoon, Sophia stepped outside to check on the roof progress. She shaded her eyes against the sun, watching as Finn hammered new shingles into place. He worked shirtless in the heat, his skin bronzed from years of outdoor labor, muscles flexing with each swing of the hammer. Sophia found herself staring longer than was proper, mesmerized by the fluid strength of his movements. When he glanced down and caught her eye, she blushed furiously, pretending to be examining the repair work with critical interest. Finn grinned as if he could read her thoughts, but said nothing to embarrass her. Looking better already, isn't it? He called down. Much, she agreed, grateful for the chance to compose herself. I can't thank you and your men enough. Don't thank us yet, Finn replied, placing another shingle. Still plenty to do before this place is properly habitable. By sunset, the roof was nearly complete, The broken window boarded up until proper glass could be acquired, and the door rehung with new hinges. Inside, Sophia and Mrs. Abernathy had made significant progress as well. The floor was swept clean, cobwebs removed, and the broken table mended by Tom during a break from roof work. As the men packed up their tools, Finn approached Sophia, now wearing his shirt again, much to her mingled disappointment and relief. "We'll finish the roof tomorrow," he promised. "After that, we can focus on making the interior more comfortable." "It already looks like a different place," Sophia marveled, gazing at the cabin with new hope. "I thought it would take weeks to make it even minimally habitable." "Many hands make light work," Finn quoted with a smile, "but it's still no place for you to sleep tonight. Another few days at my place won't hurt." Sophia hesitated. "I don't want to wear out my welcome." "Impossible," Mrs. Abernathy declared, joining them. "In fact, I insist you stay at least through next week. Give us time to make this place properly livable." Looking at the determined expressions on both their faces, Sophia realized further protest would be futile. Besides, the prospect of more nights in that comfortable bed was too tempting to refuse. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm more grateful than I can say." The next several days fell into a pattern. Mornings were spent at Finn's ranch, where Sophia insisted on helping Mrs. Abernathy with household chores to earn her keep. Afternoons found her at her own cabin, working alongside the men when they could spare time from their regular duties, or alone when they couldn't. Finn proved true to his word about the spring roundup demanding his attention. Some days he could only spare an hour to check on her progress, but he always arrived with supplies, tools, or some small item he thought might be useful: a repaired kettle, a set of slightly worn but serviceable curtains, seeds for a vegetable garden. On the 5th day, Sophia was scrubbing the cabin's single window, newly glazed with glass Finn had brought from Independence, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Expecting Finn, she was surprised to see a woman riding toward the cabin, young, fashionably dressed, with a confidence to her posture that spoke of breeding and wealth. The stranger dismounted gracefully and approached with a friendly smile. "You must be Miss Winters," she called. "I'm Eliza Montgomery. My father owns the Flying M Ranch to the east." "Pleased to meet you," Sophia replied, wiping her hands on her apron before extending one in greeting. Eliza shook it firmly. "I've come to officially welcome you to the area. We don't get many new neighbors, especially unaccompanied ladies." There was no judgment in her tone, only friendly interest. Sophia found herself immediately warming to the other woman. "Would you like some tea?" she offered. "I can't promise much in the way of comfort yet, but the roof no longer leaks, and I have a functioning stove." Eliza accepted gladly, and soon they were seated at the mended table, drinking tea from mismatched cups Sophia had found in Independence during her one trip to town. "Finnegan Hayes has been helping you, I hear," Eliza remarked, stirring a spoonful of precious sugar into her tea. "Yes, he's been incredibly kind," Sophia replied. "I don't know what I would have done without his assistance." Eliza smiled knowingly. "Finn's a good man. Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for him over the years, but he's never shown particular interest in any of them." Sophia felt an unexpected twinge at this information. "He seems devoted to his ranch," she observed neutrally. "Oh, certainly. Built it from nothing, which is more than most men around here can claim." Eliza leaned forward slightly. "But between us, I think he's just been waiting for the right woman, someone with spirit and independence to match his own." Sophia busied herself with her teacup, unsure how to respond to this obvious hint. "We're merely neighbors," she said finally. "He's been very helpful, but I'm sure he'd do the same for anyone." Eliza looked unconvinced but changed the subject graciously. Tell me, what are your plans for this place? 30 acres isn't enough for serious cattle ranching. Grateful for the shift in conversation, Sophia outlined her modest intentions: a large vegetable garden, perhaps a few milk cows and chickens, maybe eventually a small orchard. I'm not looking to build an empire, she explained. Just a place that's mine where I can be self-sufficient. A worthy goal, Eliza approved, though not an easy one for a woman alone. So I keep being told, Sophia said with a hint of weariness. Yet I don't see many alternatives. Oh, I didn't mean to discourage you, Eliza clarified. Quite the opposite. I think it's admirable. And you're not entirely alone. You have neighbors willing to help. She finished her tea and rose. Including me. I'm quite good with chickens, and I have a setting hen that's hatched more chicks than we need. I'll bring you half a dozen when they're ready if you'd like. That's incredibly generous, Sophia said, touched by the offer. Nonsense. It's how we survive out here, by helping each other. Eliza gathered her riding gloves. Will you be at the spring social next Saturday? The whole community gathers at the Wilsons' barn for dancing and food. It would be a good chance for you to meet everyone. I hadn't heard about it, Sophia admitted. Well, consider yourself invited. Everyone brings something to share: preserves, bread, whatever you have. Don't worry if it's not much. Just your presence will be welcome. With a final smile, Eliza departed, leaving Sophia with much to consider. That evening, when Finn arrived to check on her progress, Sophia mentioned the social. Ah, yes, he said, helping her nail a shelf to the wall. Forgot to tell you about that. It's quite the event around here. Only happens twice a year, spring and harvest time. Eliza Montgomery suggested I should attend. Finn glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Eliza's good people. Her father's the wealthiest rancher in the county, but they don't put on airs. He hammered another nail with perhaps more force than necessary. You two seem to hit it off. She was very kind, Sophia confirmed. Offered me chicks for a start on a flock. That sounds like her. Finn tested the shelf's sturdiness. You should go to the social. Good way to meet your other neighbors. Will you be there? Sophia asked, trying to sound casual. I generally make an appearance, he replied, still focused on the shelf. Not much for dancing, but Mrs. Abernathy's apple pie is expected. I see. Sophia busied herself with arranging her few books on the newly hung shelf. I'm not sure what I could bring. My cooking skills are adequate, but nothing special. Bring yourself, Finn said simply. That'll be enough. The directness of his statement caught her off guard, and she turned to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, the small cabin seemed to shrink around them, the air growing thick with unspoken words. Finn broke the spell first, clearing his throat and turning back to his toolbox. Your water barrel needs fixing. The staves have dried out and it's leaking. I'll bring the tools for that tomorrow. Thank you, Sophia managed, her voice not entirely steady. As the week progressed, Sophia split her time between improving her cabin and helping Mrs. Abernathy prepare for the social. The housekeeper had taken it upon herself to ensure Sophia would make a good impression, insisting she contribute to the gathering's food offerings. Everyone will be curious about you, Mrs. Abernathy explained as she supervised Sophia's preparation of a batch of shortbread. Better to give them something delicious to remember you by than let them focus only on your circumstances. My circumstances, Sophia repeated, dusting flour from her hands. A young, unmarried woman living alone, Mrs. Abernathy clarified. Some will find it scandalous, others pitiable. Neither is what you want. What do I want then? Sophia asked, amused by the older woman's forthright manner. To be respected, came the immediate reply. Admired for your independence and capability, not gossiped about for your solitude. Mrs. Abernathy tested the dough with experienced fingers. More butter. Sophia obediently added another spoonful. Is that how you've lived your life? Demanding respect rather than pity. Precisely, the housekeeper nodded. And it's served me well. I've never lacked for work or friendship despite lacking a husband these 30 years. On the morning of the social, Sophia was surprised when Tom arrived at her cabin leading a wagon rather than the usual horses. Finn thought you might need help transporting your things to the Wilson place, he explained. It's a good 10 miles west. Sophia hadn't considered the logistics of attending the gathering. That's very thoughtful, but won't he need the wagon? He's riding over separately, Tom replied. Had some business in town first. Said he'd meet us there. With Tom's help, Sophia loaded her carefully wrapped shortbread and a jar of honey she'd purchased in Independence as her contributions to the social. She wore her best dress, a modest blue cotton with white piping that Mrs. Abernathy had helped her alter to a more flattering fit, and her mother's cameo brooch, one of the few family heirlooms she still possessed. The Wilson ranch was larger than Finn's, with an enormous barn that had been cleared of hay and livestock for the occasion. By the time they arrived, the celebration was already in full swing. Tables laden with food lined one wall, while a small band of local musicians played lively tunes in the corner. Lanterns hung from the rafters, and the packed dirt floor had been swept smooth for dancing. Sophia felt a flutter of nervousness as she entered. Despite having lived in St. Louis most of her life, she'd attended few social gatherings since her mother's death, devoting herself instead to caring for her ailing father. Eliza Montgomery spotted her immediately and hurried over. Sophia. I'm so glad you came. She took Sophia's arm and began introducing her to what seemed like everyone in attendance: the doctor and his wife from Independence, the minister and his family, neighboring ranchers and their households. Names and faces blurred together, but Sophia did her best to remember each one, knowing these people would be her community now. Most were welcoming, if curious about the young woman fixing up old Jenkins' place, though a few of the older women regarded her with thinly veiled suspicion. Don't mind Mrs. Wilson and her friends, Eliza whispered after one particularly cool greeting. They're suspicious of any unmarried woman under 40, afraid we'll steal their husbands or corrupt their sons, as if we had nothing better to do with our time. Sophia laughed despite herself. Is that why you remain unmarried? Too busy for husband stealing? Precisely, Eliza grinned, though I have been tempted once or twice just to see their reactions. Her expression grew more serious. Truthfully, I've had offers, but none that would let me keep the freedom I've grown accustomed to. My father indulges me shamelessly, lets me help manage the ranch, ride wherever I please, speak my mind without censure. Few husbands would be so accommodating. Sophia nodded in understanding. My father was similar. He encouraged my reading, taught me bookkeeping, treated me as a person rather than a decoration. Precisely why we can't settle for less in a husband, Eliza concluded. She glanced toward the barn entrance. Speaking of men worth considering. Sophia followed her gaze to see Finn entering, dressed in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed. He cut an impressive figure, taller than most men present, and carrying himself with quiet confidence. Several women immediately took notice of his arrival, but his eyes scanned the crowd until they found Sophia. A smile warmed his features as he made his way toward her. You made it, he said simply when he reached them. Everything goes smoothly with the wagon. Tom was the perfect escort, Sophia confirmed, though I'm not sure my shortbread survived the journey intact. I'm sure it's delicious regardless, Finn assured her. He nodded to Eliza. Miss Montgomery, Your father mentioned you might have some cattle to sell next month. I'd be interested in discussing terms when you have time. Of course, Eliza agreed. Stop by next week. She glanced between them with a knowing smile. I should circulate. Sophia, save me a dance if the fiddler plays anything slow enough for conversation. As Eliza moved away, Sophia became acutely aware of standing alone with Finn amid the crowded gathering. Several curious glances were directed their way, and she felt heat rising to her cheeks. Everyone's staring, she murmured. Not everyone, Finn corrected. Just the curious and the jealous. Jealous? Sophia echoed, surprised. Finn's mouth quirked in a half-smile. You're the most interesting person to arrive in these parts in years, and certainly the most beautiful. Of course they're curious. The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, left Sophia momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, Mrs. Abernathy appeared with a plate of food. There you are, child. You need to eat before all the good dishes are gone. She thrust the plate into Sophia's hands. Finn, make yourself useful and find the girl something to drink. As Finn obediently moved toward the beverage table, Mrs. Abernathy lowered her voice. He cleans up nicely, doesn't he? Had his good shirt pressed special for today. Mrs. Abernathy, Sophia protested weakly. You shouldn't imply I'm not implying anything, the housekeeper interrupted with feigned innocence. Just making an observation, though if I were 30 years younger. Sophia couldn't help but laugh. You're incorrigible. One of my finest qualities, Mrs. Abernathy agreed cheerfully. Now eat something. You're too thin by half. The evening progressed pleasantly. The food was plentiful and delicious, the company largely welcoming and the music infectious. Sophia found herself genuinely enjoying the celebration, especially when Eliza reclaimed her for a slower tune that allowed them to continue their earlier conversation. Finn hasn't taken his eyes off you all evening, Eliza observed as they moved around the floor in a simple ladies' reel. Nonsense, Sophia demurred, though she'd been aware of his gaze following her more than once. He's just being neighborly. If that's neighborly, I need to move closer to his ranch, Eliza teased. He's danced with 3 other women, but his attention never left you, even when Mrs. Wilson's daughter practically threw herself at him during that last waltz. Sophia had indeed noticed the pretty blonde who'd claimed Finn's arm for a lively dance, pressing herself closer than strictly necessary. The sight had provoked an unexpected surge of jealousy that she'd struggled to suppress. He's free to dance with whomever he chooses, she said, striving for a casual tone. Eliza's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled. Of course. And you're free to break hearts all across the county if you choose. Just be kind to his, will you? Finnegan Hayes is one of the good ones. Before Sophia could protest further, the music ended and they were separated by the changing formations. When she next had a moment to catch her breath, Finn materialized at her side, offering a cup of punch. Enjoying yourself? He asked, his voice pitched low beneath the general noise of the gathering. More than I expected to, Sophia admitted. Everyone's been very welcoming. Most folks around here are good-hearted, Finn agreed, though they can be wary of newcomers until they prove themselves. And how does one prove oneself in independence? Sophia asked curiously. By enduring, Finn replied simply. Surviving the winters, the droughts, the storms. By not giving up when things get difficult. He looked at her thoughtfully. Though I don't think you'll have any trouble on that count, you strike me as remarkably determined. I am when it matters, Sophia said softly. And having a place of my own, a home that's truly mine, that matters more than anything. Finn nodded in understanding. I felt the same way when I first staked my claim, like I'd finally found somewhere I belonged. The fiddle struck up a new tune, slower and more melodic than before. Finn hesitated, then extended his hand. "Would you do me the honor?" Sophia placed her hand in his, her heart quickening at the simple contact. "I should warn you, I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I," Finn assured her with a smile. "We can be awkward together." But they weren't awkward at all. Finn led with surprising grace for a man who spent most of his days on horseback, and Sophia found herself following his steps naturally, as if they'd danced together many times before. His hand at her waist was respectful but warm, and she was acutely conscious of his nearness, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. "Thank you," she said after a moment of silence. "For the dance?" Finn asked. "For everything. The roof, the window, the door. For saving Penny and finding me. For making me feel welcome here." Sophia met his eyes directly. "I'm not used to accepting so much help. It doesn't come naturally to me." "Independence is important," Finn agreed. "But so is knowing when to lean on others. We all need that sometimes." The music drew to a close, but Finn didn't immediately release her hand. For a heartbeat, Sophia thought he might say something more, something that would change the careful friendship developing between them. But the moment passed as another, livelier tune began, and other dancers moved around them, breaking the spell. Finn escorted her back to the edge of the floor. "I should check on Tom and the wagon. It'll be dark soon, and the trail back to your cabin can be tricky at night." Sophia nodded, trying not to show her disappointment at the evening's end. "Of course. I'll gather my things." The ride back was quiet, with Tom driving the wagon and Finn riding alongside. The night was clear. Stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds on black cloth, and a three-quarter moon provided ample light for their journey. When they reached Sophia's cabin, Tom tactfully remained with the wagon while Finn escorted her to the door. "Thank you for taking me tonight," Sophia said, suddenly shy in the intimate darkness. "I enjoyed myself immensely." "I'm glad," Finn replied. He seemed to be struggling with something, his usual composure slightly fractured. "Sophia, He paused and she waited, heart hammering against her ribs. "I was wondering if you might join us for Sunday dinner tomorrow," he finally said, though she sensed it wasn't what he'd originally intended. "Mrs. Abernathy always cooks enough for an army, and she's mentioned missing your company these past few days." "I'd be delighted," Sophia said, masking her confusion at the moment that seemed to have slipped away. "What time should I come? I'll come for you around noon, if that's agreeable." "Perfectly," Finn nodded, his hat in his hands. "Good night, then." "Good night, Finn." He turned to go, then paused and looked back. "You looked beautiful tonight," he said quietly, "in case no one told you." Before she could respond, he was striding back to his horse, leaving Sophia staring after him with a mixture of confusion and hope swirling in her chest. Sunday arrived with perfect weather-clear skies, gentle breezes, and sunshine that warmed without scorching. Sophia spent the morning putting finishing touches on her cabin, which was now fully weather-tight and modestly furnished with items purchased in Independence or gifted by neighbors who had learned of her situation. She dressed with care for dinner at Finn's, choosing her second-best dress, a sage green cotton that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. Her hair she arranged in a simple knot at the nape of her neck, with a few soft tendrils left free to frame her face. Precisely at noon, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking out the window, she was surprised to see not Finn but Tom arriving with the wagon. "Miss Winters," he called, tipping his hat as she emerged. "Mr. Hayes sends his apologies. One of the mares went into labor this morning, difficult birth. He's with her now, but asked me to bring you along as planned. Mrs. Abernathy would have his hide if you missed Sunday dinner." "Of course," Sophia agreed, hiding her disappointment. "Is the mare in danger?" Tom's weathered face creased with concern. "It's not looking good." Foal's turned wrong and Finn's been trying to reposition it since dawn. Doc Warren's there too, but—" He shrugged eloquently. At the Hayes ranch, Mrs. Abernathy greeted her warmly but with evident distraction. "They're still in the barn," she explained, taking Sophia's shawl. "Been there for hours now. I've taken food out twice, but neither Finn nor the doctor would stop long enough to eat properly." "Is there anything I can do to help?" Sophia asked. Mrs. Abernathy hesitated. "You know anything about horses? Birthing, specifically?" "Not horses," Sophia admitted. "But I helped deliver calves on my uncle's farm as a girl, and I assisted the midwife when my cousin's baby came. The principles can't be that different." The older woman nodded decisively. "Take this out to them, then." She thrust a tray containing a pot of coffee and sandwiches into Sophia's hands. "And offer your help. Finn's too proud to ask, but they've been at it for hours with no progress." Sophia carried the tray to the barn, where she found Finn and an older man she recognized as Dr. Warren from the social, both looking exhausted as they attended to a bay mare lying on her side in a bed of straw. The animal was clearly in distress, her sides heaving with labored breaths. "Sophia," Finn said, looking up in surprise. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, arms covered in blood to the forearms, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "You shouldn't be here. This isn't going well." "Mrs. Abernathy sent food," she replied, setting down the tray. "And another pair of hands if you need them." Dr. Warren straightened with a groan, pressing a hand to his lower back. "At this point, we need a miracle more than hands. Foal's position is all wrong, breech with one leg back. Can't get leverage to turn it properly." Sophia approached the mare cautiously. "May I?" she asked, looking to Finn for permission. He hesitated, then nodded. "She's weakening. If we don't get the foal out soon, we'll lose them both." Sophia removed her outer skirt, leaving only her petticoat, and knelt beside the exhausted animal. She spoke soothingly as she examined the situation, her smaller hands potentially an advantage in the confined space. "I think I can reach the leg that's caught," she said after a moment, "if you can keep her still." For the next half hour they worked together in tense concentration. Sophia's arms ached from the awkward position and sweat beaded on her forehead, but she persisted, using techniques she'd seen employed in difficult cattle births. Finally, she felt the foal shift. "There," she exclaimed. "I've got the leg straightened. If you pull now, doctor." The next few minutes were intense but productive. With the foal finally in the correct position, the mare was able to deliver with assistance. When the newborn colt finally slid free, dark and slick with birth fluids, a collective sigh of relief filled the barn. "Will they be all right?" Sophia asked, watching anxiously as the mare struggled to rise. "The mare's exhausted but should recover," Dr. Warren said, examining the foal. "This little fellow seems strong despite his difficult arrival." Finn was looking at Sophia with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something beyond gratitude, tinged with wonder and perhaps a touch of embarrassment. "You saved them both," he said quietly. "I never would have guessed you had such skills." Sophia shrugged, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "Farm life teaches all sorts of unexpected lessons. My uncle raised cattle, and every hand was needed during calving season, even little girls." Dr. Warren chuckled as he packed his bag. "Well, Miss Winters, if you ever tire of farming, you'd make a fine veterinary assistant. Not many with the cool head and steady hands you've shown today." After the doctor departed, Finn and Sophia stayed to ensure mother and foal were bonding properly. The colt had managed to stand on wobbly legs and was nursing eagerly, a good sign for his prospects. "He's beautiful," Sophia remarked, watching the pair. "Have you decided on a name?" "Miracle seems appropriate," Finn replied with a tired smile. "Or perhaps Fortune." He glanced at her. Or Sophia in honor of his savior. A colt named Sophia, she laughed. That would cause confusion. Savior, then, Finn decided. It suits him, born against the odds. They watched the horses in companionable silence for a few more minutes before Finn spoke again. I'm sorry about dinner. Not exactly what I promised you. It was more memorable than any dinner could have been, Sophia assured him. She looked down at her stained petticoat and bloodied arms. Though I'm hardly presentable for the dining table now. Finn's gaze traveled over her, lingering on the tendrils of hair that had escaped her careful arrangement and now curled damply against her neck. You look perfect to me, he said softly. The simple sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, and Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. Before she could respond, Mrs. Abernathy's voice called from outside the barn. Is everyone alive in there? Dinner's been ready this past hour. Coming, Finn called back, the intimate moment broken. He offered Sophia his arm with an apologetic smile. Shall we? I believe I owe you a meal, though we're both a sight. Mrs. Abernathy merely raised an eyebrow at their bedraggled appearance but said nothing as she served the delayed dinner. Tom joined them, having heard the good news about the foal's safe delivery, and the conversation flowed easily around the table. Afterward, as the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, Finn offered to drive Sophia home himself. I've imposed on Tom enough for one day, he explained. Besides, I'd like the chance to thank you properly for your help. They rode in the wagon rather than on horseback, which provided a more comfortable journey after the day's exertions. As they traveled, Finn spoke more openly than he had before about his life, his childhood in Pennsylvania, the death of his parents that had sent him west seeking a new beginning, the years of hard work that had built his ranch from nothing. It was lonely at first, he admitted. Just me and Tom in that first lean winter, living in a cabin not much better than yours is now. Sometimes I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. What changed? Sophia asked. Spring, Finn replied with a smile. The land came alive again, and so did my determination. Each year got a little easier, the ranch a little bigger. He glanced at her. And I learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the sunsets, the first snow, small victories like a colt born against the odds. When they reached her cabin, Finn insisted on checking her water barrel and stove before departing, making sure everything was in working order for the night ahead. As he prepared to leave, he paused on the threshold. Sophia, he began, then seemed to lose his nerve. I just wanted to say. That is, I've been meaning to tell you. Yes, she prompted gently. He took a deep breath. I admire you, your courage in coming here alone, taking on this place, your skills with the mare today, everything about you, really. He looked away, uncharacteristically flustered. I've never met anyone quite like you. Sophia's heart quickened. I feel the same way about you, she admitted quietly. Your kindness to a stranger, your generosity. You've made me feel welcome in a way I never expected. Finn's eyes returned to hers, something hopeful kindling in their blue depths. Then perhaps, would you permit me to call on you, properly I mean, not just as a neighbor helping with repairs? The simple request so formally delivered made Sophia smile. I would like that very much. Relief and joy transformed his features. Good, that's good. He seemed at a loss for further words, settling for a gentle squeeze of her hand before departing. Sophia watched him go, a warm contentment settling in her chest. For the first time since her father's death, the future seemed full of promise rather than uncertainty. As spring blossomed into summer, Sophia's cabin and land underwent a remarkable transformation. With Finn's continued assistance and advice from neighbors like Eliza, she established a thriving vegetable garden, rebuilt the chicken coop, and acquired not only the promised chicks, but also 2 milk cows and a small pig. True to his word, Finn called on her regularly, sometimes bringing small gifts, other times simply offering his company for an evening. They took to sitting on her porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the western sky in spectacular colors, while discussing everything from books to cattle breeding to their hopes for the future. Slowly, carefully, their relationship deepened beyond friendship. The first time Finn kissed her, it was a summer evening scented with wildflowers and wood smoke. They had been discussing a passage from Wuthering Heights, which Sophia had lent him despite his protests that he wasn't much for fiction. Catherine and Heathcliff seemed determined to make themselves miserable, he observed, closing the book. Why not simply declare their feelings and be done with it? Pride, Sophia suggested. Fear of rejection, the complications of social expectations. Seems foolish to let such things stand in the way of happiness, Finn replied, his gaze intent upon her face. Perhaps they didn't recognize happiness when it stood before them, Sophia said softly. Finn reached out then, his hand gentle against her cheek. I recognize it, he murmured, before leaning in to press his lips to hers in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened into something that left them both breathless. When they finally parted, Finn rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the day I found you on the trail after the storm. What took you so long? Sophia teased, her fingers curled in the fabric of his shirt. I was afraid you'd think me too forward, he admitted, or that you might not welcome my attention. I welcome it very much, she assured him, drawing him back for another kiss that left no room for doubt. From that evening forward, they made no secret of their courtship. Finn took Sophia to Independence for proper dinners at the hotel restaurant, escorted her to church on Sundays, and introduced her as my Sophia to anyone they encountered. For her part, Sophia found herself falling more deeply in love with each passing day, captivated by Finn's strength, his gentle humor, and his unwavering support of her independence. By late summer, as Sophia's garden yielded its first abundant harvest and her chickens began to lay with satisfying regularity, the community had fully accepted her as one of their own. She had formed a particular friendship with Eliza Montgomery, who visited often and taught her the finer points of preserving fruits and vegetables for the winter ahead. You've transformed this place, Eliza remarked one afternoon as they sealed jars of pickled beans. I barely recognize it as the same shabby cabin Finn described to me this spring. Sophia looked around with pride at her snug home. The interior walls had been whitewashed, cheerful curtains hung at the windows, and sturdy furniture, some purchased, some built by Finn, filled the space. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, and shelves lined with preserves promised sustenance through the winter. It still needs work, she demurred, but it feels like home now. And Finn, Eliza asked with her characteristic directness, does he feel like home too? Sophia couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. Yes, she admitted, more than I ever expected. Has he asked you yet? Eliza pressed, sealing another jar with practiced efficiency. Ask me what? Eliza rolled her eyes. To marry him, of course. The man is clearly besotted. Half the county is laying bets on when he'll propose. Eliza, Sophia exclaimed, scandalized. People are not betting on my personal affairs. Oh, they absolutely are, her friend assured her with a grin. Mrs. Wilson has $5 on harvest time. Reverend Phillips thinks Christmas. I've put my money on the September social, which is next weekend, in case you've forgotten. Sophia shook her head, torn between embarrassment and amusement. You're all going to be disappointed. Finn and I have never discussed marriage. But you've thought about it, Eliza said shrewdly. Sophia couldn't deny it. In quiet moments, she had indeed imagined a future as Finn's wife, sharing his home, raising children together, growing old side by side. The vision filled her with a happiness she'd scarcely dared hope for after the losses she'd endured. "Would you say yes?" Eliza persisted. "If he asked, in a heartbeat," Sophia admitted softly, "but I won't pressure him. He's been so respectful of my independence, my need to establish myself here. I want to give him the same consideration." Eliza smiled knowingly. "I don't think you'll have long to wait." The man practically glows when you enter a room. The September social arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp mornings giving way to golden afternoons, the surrounding hills touched with the first hints of fall color. Sophia prepared with particular care, wearing a new dress she'd ordered from St. Louis with some of the egg money she'd saved over the summer, a deep burgundy that complemented her dark hair and fair complexion. Finn arrived to escort her, looking especially handsome in a new shirt and vest, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. His expression when he first saw her was everything Sophia could have wished for: surprise, admiration, and unmistakable desire darkening his blue eyes. "You look—" he began, then shook his head. "There aren't words adequate to the task." Sophia blushed with pleasure. "You clean up rather nicely yourself, Mr. Hayes." The social was even more well attended than the spring gathering had been, with tables groaning under the weight of harvest bounty, and the music more spirited than ever. Sophia found herself warmly welcomed by neighbors who had once regarded her with suspicion, her success with the cabin and garden having earned their respect. Throughout the evening, she was acutely aware of Finn's presence, even when they were separated by the crowd. His gaze found her repeatedly, a silent connection that made her heart quicken each time. When they danced, the touch of his hand at her waist seemed to burn through the fabric of her dress, and the way he held her fractionally closer than propriety strictly allowed did not go unnoticed by the more observant attendees. As the evening progressed, Eliza caught Sophia's eye across the room and made a subtle gesture toward the barn door, indicating the starlit yard beyond. Sophia nodded in understanding her friend was creating an opportunity for a private moment. "It's rather warm in here," she remarked to Finn as their dance ended. "Would you mind stepping outside for some air?" His eyes darkened with understanding. "I was about to suggest the same." They slipped outside unnoticed, the cool night air a welcome relief after the crowded barn. Finn guided her to a quiet spot beneath an enormous oak tree, its leaves rustling gently in the breeze. "Happy?" he asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "Very," Sophia confirmed, leaning into his side. "Though Eliza tells me half the county is betting on when you'll propose, so I'm afraid we're providing entertainment for the masses." Finn's chuckle vibrated through his chest. "Is that so? And what did you tell her?" "That we hadn't discussed marriage," Sophia replied truthfully. "And that I wouldn't pressure you." Finn was quiet for a moment, his arm tightening around her waist. "Would you like to discuss it now?" he finally asked. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "If you wish." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Sophia Winters, I've loved you since the day I found you on that muddy trail, soaked to the skin and still determined to find your horse. Everything I've learned about you since has only deepened that love: your courage, your intelligence, your kindness." He took a deep breath. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it revealed a delicate gold ring set with a modest diamond that caught the moonlight in fiery sparkles. "It was my mother's," Finn explained. "The only thing of value I brought with me from Pennsylvania." "It's beautiful," Sophia whispered, hardly daring to breathe. "Not half as beautiful as you." Finn's voice was husky with emotion. Sophia, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I promise to cherish your independence even as I cherish you, to be your partner in all things, to build a life worthy of your love. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. Yes, she said simply. Yes, with all my heart. The kiss that followed was tender at first, then increasingly passionate, communicating all the love and desire they'd been carefully restraining in public. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Finn slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. A perfect fit, he observed. Like us. They returned to the social hand in hand, unable to keep their news private for long. Eliza spotted the ring immediately and let out a triumphant whoop that drew everyone's attention. I won the bet, she announced to the room at large. September social, just as I predicted. A mixture of groans and cheers followed this declaration, along with a flood of congratulations. Mrs. Abernathy wept openly, declaring she'd been praying for this outcome since the day Penny had appeared during the storm. Tom slapped Finn on the back with enough force to stagger a lesser man, and even Mrs. Wilson unbent enough to offer Sophia a grudgingly sincere wish for happiness. The celebration took on a new dimension, becoming an impromptu engagement party. The fiddler struck up a waltz, and Finn led Sophia onto the floor for a dance that felt more meaningful than any they'd shared before. "When shall we be married?" he asked as they moved together, oblivious to the knowing smiles around them. "Before winter," Sophia suggested. "I've no desire for a long engagement." "Next month, then," Finn decided. "That will give us time to prepare, but not so long that I'll go mad with waiting." Sophia laughed, delighted by his eagerness. "Next month it is. A simple ceremony at the church, perhaps." "Whatever you wish," Finn agreed. "Though Mrs. Abernathy will insist on a proper feast afterward, I warn you." "I wouldn't dream of denying her the pleasure," Sophia assured him. "Besides, I've grown rather fond of her tyrannical ways." "She'll be thrilled to have you permanently under her roof," Finn said. Then, noticing Sophia's slight frown, he added, "Unless. Would you prefer to stay at your cabin? We could divide our time between the two properties." Sophia was touched by his consideration. "I've worked hard to make the cabin a home," she admitted, "but your ranch is where our future lies." "The cabin can become a guest house, perhaps, or a place for quiet retreats when we need solitude." Finn's smile was radiant. "You continue to amaze me. Most women would simply assume they'd move to the larger, more comfortable house." "I'm not most women," Sophia reminded him. "Thank God for that," Finn murmured, pulling her incrementally closer as they danced. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparation and joy. News of their engagement spread quickly throughout the county, bringing a steady stream of visitors bearing gifts and good wishes to both Sophia's cabin and Finn's ranch. Eliza appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, helping Sophia with everything from selecting fabric for a new dress to arranging for flowers from the Montgomery greenhouse. Mrs. Abernathy took charge of the wedding feast, planning an elaborate menu that would showcase the best of the fall harvest. Finn, meanwhile, surprised Sophia with a series of improvements to their future home. He added a second wardrobe to the master bedroom for her clothes, built new bookshelves in the sitting room to accommodate her modest but cherished collection, and commissioned a special wedding gift that he refused to reveal before the ceremony. The night before the wedding, Sophia stayed at her cabin for the last time as an unmarried woman. Eliza kept her company, helping with last-minute preparations and offering both practical advice and moral support. "Are you nervous?" Eliza asked as they sat before the fire, sharing a pot of tea. "A little," Sophia admitted. "Not about marrying Finn. I've never been more certain of anything, but about the change, the newness of it all. Eliza nodded understandingly. It's natural. You've been independent for so long, making your own decisions. Partnership requires adjustment. Exactly. Sophia stared into her teacup. What if I'm not good at it? At being a wife, I mean. Oh, Sophia. Eliza reached over to squeeze her hand. You're already good at the most important parts: loving him, respecting him, communicating with him. The rest is just details you'll figure out together. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the kind of perfect October morning that seemed created especially for new beginnings. Sophia dressed with Eliza's help, the simple ivory gown they'd created together complemented by her mother's cameo, and a crown of autumn flowers for her hair. You look radiant, Eliza declared, stepping back to admire the final effect. Finn won't know what hit him. The small church in Independence was filled to capacity with friends and neighbors. As Sophia walked down the aisle alone, having no father or brother to give her away, she was surprised to find herself completely calm, her earlier nervousness replaced by absolute certainty. Finn waited at the altar, his expression transforming from anxious anticipation to pure joy when he caught sight of her. As she reached his side, he took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered. The ceremony itself was brief but deeply meaningful, the traditional vows carrying new weight as they pledged their lives to one another. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Finn's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the future they would build together. The celebration afterward at the Hayes Ranch, now their shared home, continued well into the evening. Tables set up in the yard groaned under Mrs. Abernathy's feast, and lanterns hung from tree branches created a magical atmosphere as darkness fell. The fiddler from Independence provided music for dancing, and even the most reserved neighbors joined in the celebration. As the party began to wind down, Finn led Sophia away from the remaining guests to a quiet corner of the yard. "I have something to show you," he said, an almost boyish excitement in his expression. "Your wedding gift." He guided her around the side of the house to where a small garden had been enclosed with a white picket fence. In the center stood a beautiful wrought iron bench beneath an arbor clearly designed for climbing roses. "I know how much you love gardens," Finn explained, watching her face anxiously. "I thought you might like a private space just for you, where you can sit and read or simply enjoy the quiet." Tears sprang to Sophia's eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness. "How did you know exactly what I would want?" "I pay attention," Finn said simply, "to everything about you." Sophia reached up to touch his face. "I love you, Finnegan Hayes. More than I have words to express." "Show me," he suggested, his voice deepening as he drew her into his arms. Their kiss was full of promise and desire, a prelude to the night ahead. When they finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, the remaining guests had tactfully disappeared, leaving them alone to begin their married life together. The years that followed brought challenges, as all lives do, but also deep joy and fulfillment. Sophia's garden at the Hayes Ranch expanded each year, becoming famous throughout the county for its beauty and bounty. Her cabin remained a special retreat, occasionally housing visitors or serving as a quiet workspace when either of them needed solitude. Finn's ranch prospered under their joint management, as Sophia's head for figures complemented his practical knowledge of cattle and land. They weathered droughts and blizzards, market fluctuations and political changes, their partnership strengthening with each obstacle overcome. Their first child, a son they named Harold after Sophia's father, arrived a year after their wedding, a sturdy boy with Finn's blue eyes and Sophia's determined spirit. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later, and eventually another son, Thomas, named in honor of the loyal foreman who had become like family. Through it all, they never forgot how their story began with a frightened horse in a thunderstorm, a determined tracking across muddy terrain, and the simple act of returning what was lost. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat together on the wrought iron bench in Sophia's garden, watching their children play with the latest generation of horses born on the ranch, Finn took her hand, the same one that now wore both her wedding band and her engagement ring. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "The storm, Penny running away, all of it." "Often," Sophia admitted. "How different my life would have been if she'd run in any other direction, if she hadn't found your ranch." "I like to think we would have found each other anyway," Finn mused. "Some things are just meant to be." Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, watching as their eldest son carefully led a pony with their daughter perched proudly on its back. The pony was the grandchild of Savior, the colt they had helped deliver all those years ago. "Do you remember what you said that day?" she asked. "About recognizing happiness when it stands before you." Finn smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I remember. And I was right, wasn't I? This is happiness, you, our children, our life together. Everything that matters." "Everything that matters," Sophia echoed, her heart full. In the distance, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising summer rain to nourish the land. But this time, Sophia didn't fear the lightning or the thunder. She had learned long ago that sometimes what seems like disaster is merely the beginning of a journey home.